it's really important that we work in a business that we love and that the team love. It's all about the people. So from a cultural point of view, we've really spent a lot of time on our culture and our values and making sure that we've got a really supportive and a culture that people want to work at. Why would I create a business that I don't enjoy? Why would I create a business that people don't enjoy working at? And I know that sounds really obvious to say, but there are many businesses out there that aren't enjoyable. And we work in an industry which is enjoyable, but it's putting the support around it as well.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. Trying to keep it fresh.
A note change there, a crescendo, if you will.
Did it get louder? Yeah, a little pitch change there too.
I don't know.
So I have a question.
Okay.
When you walk into a facility, a theme park, a family entertainment center, maybe someplace you haven't been before, can you recall a typical emotion that you're feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the emotion aligns with probably what the theme is, whether it's a theme park or even just the theme of the facility itself. I can tell you, here's one that comes to mind. I've been to Universal Studios Hollywood a couple of times. Have you been there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I've spent many years at Universal Orlando, been there many, many times, but about 15 years ago, I think was the last time I was at Universal Hollywood. The first time I went there, I was like 4 years old. The second time was on a trip in college. And I remember we got to the park right before the park opened. So they kind of led us into the entry plaza. And then a woman comes out and she looks like a production assistant or something like that. And she said, okay, the director is going to be here soon. And you all need to be in your positions, in your place, and ready for the shot. That's how they open the park. Everyone's there, and then she takes like the board and she's like, and action. And then the Universal, starts playing.
Yes.
And despite the fact that I was working at Universal Studios Florida at the time, so I literally was there every single day, like at park open. But being there, I don't know if it was just what they did in Hollywood that the emotion that I felt was I was in the movie, right? I was part of it, and I got goosebumps, right? I'm getting goosebumps even just thinking. It's so simple, right? Like it was not extravagant, at all. But I remember it being I don't want to say an emotional experience, even though we're talking about emotions, but I remember it being a really cool feeling.
That's really cool. And, it's funny not to get too far into the weeds about Universal, but there is a different feel. And maybe because I've worked at Universal in Orlando, there's a different feel, I think, in Universal in Hollywood, where Universal in Orlando feels like a theme park.
Yeah.
Universal in Hollywood feels more like it's connected more deeply to making of movies. And I don't know what that makes me feel, but that's an observation. But one of the reasons I'm asking is because our guest today, Foote from Katapult, talks a lot about the emotional journey that people go on as they go through attractions, and even to the point of mapping that in their process of creating immersive attractions.
Yeah, this is a really cool interview. So Dawn is the co-founder and CEO of Katapult, Katapult with a K, based in Derby in the United Kingdom, which I've had the opportunity to visit Derby a couple of times because a former employer from many years ago was based there. So I went out there a few times. And we get to talk all about how Dawn formed Katapult with some friends from college, and then by the time they graduated, they had an established business, and then also how they got into the attractions industry, or into the themed entertainment space, and learning about Katapult's journey up till today, and then even how Katapult develops that culture within their team, and they embrace innovation. And Dawn shares on all of the values that that they embrace to really foster an incredible workplace.
And one of the things that I was really fascinated to hear her talk about was how she kind of feels like stakeholder glue, right? Where she's kind of the piece of the puzzle that holds everything together when it comes to the client and vendors and other professionals and creatives that all have to come together. Yeah, absolutely. That all have to come together to make this entity what it is. And so to hear her talk about how that all has to stick together and their role in that was really interesting.
And they've even involved the team members that we don't normally think of being involved at that high level of the process from the master planning standpoint. But she said, yeah, we involve them, or have involved them in certain projects, and she shares projects that they've worked on to be able to really engage the team member experience. Because as you and I know, we talk a lot about whether it's the guest experience or the employee experience, that can very much make or break the experience in general, and the importance of that in the design, in the master planning phase.
And I think that speaks to her personal sort of rebellious attitude that you'll hear about, because I think the way she applies it to creativity is really, really interesting. And that example of bringing in the hosts and hostesses to be a part of the design process, because they're going to be part of the operational process, is, in my experience, really thinking outside of the norm of what most places do. Now, I could be wrong, right? I haven't spoken to every designer out there, but it feels like sometimes the team member may not be thought of until, and maybe this is, in the past, but they weren't even thought of until, we open the gates and there they are, and where are the team members going to be? How do they interact with the space? So I thought that was really refreshing.
Yeah, exactly. This is just such a fascinating conversation where we really get to dive into the creative process. So I'd say let's get into this interview with Dawn Foote.
Hello, Dawn. Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to chat with you, Matt and Josh.
Absolutely. Great to chat with you. So looking forward to this conversation. Can we just start off with a little bit of your background and what you do?
Sure, yeah. So my background, I brought up in Lincolnshire in the UK, and I was a little rural village that I lived in, and enjoyed a nice childhood there. And I was a bit of a rebel teenager. I liked to go against the conventions, but I was very active in the area of campaigning for environment and animal welfare. So I spent a lot of my weekends doing that. So that kept me busy and focused. And so I was a rebel with a cause, I like to say. But in terms of being told what to do, I didn't really like it. I didn't like to have to conform to uniforms and certain ways of doing things. I like to find my own path, and I wasn't always happy with what the big guys were telling us to do. And I kind of always like to make the world a better place through some of the things that I got involved with as a child, and sort of felt this bigger urge to make a difference in the world. So from things like, I got the local seaside town close to us, which was Cleethorpes. I managed to get Animal Circus not to continue there anymore because of the way in which they operated. So that was a tick in terms of making a difference. But I moved out of Lincolnshire to go to university back in 1997, which that seems such a long time ago. And so I went off to university to study photography and what they called then time-based media. And it was at university where I met a wonderful amount of diverse, creative people. I really threw myself into studying and enjoying the university life and experimenting and exploring and figuring out how to do stuff. It was just such a period of time where you got to play and experiment and figure things out. And during that time, we were able to access so many different facilities and that the university had, technical equipment, different course things. I didn't just stick to the course that I was on. You'd be going in and speaking to the business studies students, speaking to the, architectures teams, and also, applied arts, and just basically saw it as an ability to access all this equipment and all this kit that you could have access to. And it was in our second year of university where Katapult was formed as an entity, and it was a group of collective people. There was 5 of us who were working together, collaborating on projects as a plaything to begin with, really just wanting to work together and we were working within the nightclub and entertainment industry. So Derby in the UK back then had a very vibrant nightlife, and we had a really good hip-hop, drum and bass, house nights, which were world renowned, and people would come on, would get all the big names, and we started doing live events and visuals and VJing and performance at these events, and that's where Katapult started, and we started getting paid to do this work, which was good. We got into nightclubs for free and we were getting paid, so we got our beer money, and we were able, by the end of university, we had what we called a techno room, where we pulled all of our kit and editing suites and everything all into one loft apartment in a student digs that we had, and we called it the techno room, and that's where we did all our work. And by the time we graduated, Katapult was formed as a fully fledged business, and we decided, let's give this a go. A group of people who came together who wanted to work as a collective, and actually create a business with our rules, and create something that we thought, we'll give this a go, and started getting more clients, and we started working with orchestras and a whole range of different businesses, which after a period of time we really started specializing in the themed entertainment space. So that sort of built up, and I'd say 10 years ago, 12 years ago was when we really started specializing in just themed entertainment as our client list, and have built the business over the years. And so Katapult today, being that we design and create themed attractions and experiences globally, we're fortunate enough to work with some of the world's most renowned IP who trust us with their brands, and we're able to activate those experiences, design them, and be part of this wonderful industry that we're now, as we talked about earlier, guys, in terms of it feels like one big family, in which it's a very supportive and a great industry to be part of.
Don, can you share a little bit more of that crossover into the themed entertainment space, of maybe how you got your first client, and then really kind of that turning point of saying, okay, this is the direction? Because you talked about kind of the nightclubs and the orchestras and all that space, but then this seems like a little bit of a pivot into themed entertainment. But so really determining that this is the best path forward.
Yeah, and I think it's following your passions, and as well as in terms of when you start focusing on the type of work that you're doing, and then when you're working on a certain amount of projects and you realize that they really align with your interest and passions and what lights your fire. And then came to a certain point where we had a mix of businesses, and like half were themed entertainment and half were a mix of the others, and we made an informed decision to switch off the half that wasn't, and to really core focus on themed entertainment. And that probably happened, we mentioned before, Josh, that we've both worked with this particular client, both in where you've worked before, and then somewhere who we worked, being that they were a Derby business, Pixolve, which now are Pom-Pom, so they've been through a change of ownership, but some of the projects we were working with Pixolve really opened our eyes to the wider remit within the space. And we were doing other projects, and we started working with Drayton Manor and the Merlin Entertainments Group, and that just built and built and built from there, really. And our specialist team built around that as well. So when we started bringing people into the team with real specialisms and focus, I'm proud to say that I work alongside some amazingly talented people that we're able to bring into the fold at Katapult and help us kick forward and grow.
Dawn, one of the things I'm curious about is kind of speaking about your rebellious attitude as a teenager, and now you're working with clients, and sometimes you have to talk about what the client wants, and that kind of thing. So how does your rebellious spirit serve you now in what you get to do?
Yeah, and I think that it's around pushing yourself creatively, because absolutely we operate within, clients' needs. We work with, Lego and Ferrari and other entities at IPs. Is that absolutely we're trusted with it, and we're working within that. But we always have to think in a rebel sense around creativity and how we can come up with new ideas and think about things differently. We work in I think all the way through Katapult's lifespan, there's been change. There's always been change. And I think that suits well to being adaptable to change and having a mindset that nothing ever stands still. You're always looking for another way. You're always thinking about things differently. How can we approach this? What can we do? We've never cracked it. There's always a way to move forward. And I think it's that continuous curiosity, and that's actually one of our values, is around that kind of, you have this desire to constantly figure out and tinker and think of new ways of doing stuff. And I think that's where, as a creative and a creative team, is if that's fed and you can constantly feel like you have things to figure out and the ways to improve things or analyze things, or how could we do that better, from whether it's guest insights or way things are put together or technical innovation. I think that's what keeps the appetite fed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So can we kind of maybe pull back a little bit and get maybe a deeper understanding of what Katapult does and how you serve your clients in the themed entertainment and attractions industry, and kind of drill down into the services you provide?
Yeah, sure. So we design themed attractions and experiences. So where that starts is very much on insights driven design. So we've got insights analyst team, strategy team in Katapult. So it's really understanding from a guest point of view and also audience, like what is it we're trying to design for who and why, and really taking in and understanding key data points of making sure that it's the creative brief is underpinned by those insights. So that's where we start on a project, making sure that that's right and informs the brief. We work through from a service point of view, doing the insights and strategy, master planning, concept design development, and then executive production, where we will oversee a project from beginning through to opening. And the executive production is where we work with all our partners and vendors, and really, overseeing who the right mix are for a particular attraction or experience, and bringing in the right vendors and partners to deliver that.
And so one thing I'm curious about is through that process, and you talked about change earlier, right? There's always change. So during that process, it probably doesn't exactly start out, or it doesn't end up exactly the way you thought it was going to. There's change through that process. So how do you sort of navigate some of those changes as you go through that process?
Yeah, so I think that's around understanding the brief and keeping back to that, but also knowing that there will be change and understanding the different development process that we go through. Our project management process is obviously there to guide through that, and to the creative sessions and the workshops and the check-ins that we have, and from a project pulsing point of view, is keeping things on track. And that's also a good reason why we have the insights work, is sometimes if the creative brief is kind of going off in the wrong direction, or especially when you've got different stakeholders, it's bringing it back to the why, the big idea, what we're trying to achieve, and bringing us back to that, so we don't end up going down tangents that might not be the right. And of course there are going to be opinions in different ways, but it's how we manage that process, and make sure we're delivering commercially what needs to happen, as well as creatively what needs to happen on the project. Our stakeholders vary, because we obviously work with our client can be anyone between it being an operator, an investor, or the IP, and all of them are a stakeholder. But it can be any one of them that's our direct paying client, but we're managing the stakeholder, and we're the glue between those parties to make sure that all the needs are kept from and delivered for each of those parties.
Don, can you give us a glimpse into what these creative sessions are like? Of really the blue sky starting from nothing, because when we walk into a theme park, we see it and it's done and it's beautiful and it's spectacular, but it started with a little spark, right? So can you talk about really kind of what those initial maybe brainstorm sessions are like, or really give us an understanding of that creative process?
Yeah, and we have them as we have different types of sessions that we run depending on the nature of the project, and there'll be a number of them. But we tend to meet them as like discovery sessions, the big idea session, and so we'll break them down into these different sessions which we run, which allows that thinking to happen, allows room for the creativity, and it's done in a facilitated way, and it's making sure that the right parties are around the room as well, and that you're having those touch points with the different parties at the right stage, so you don't go too far down all the way over here and you've kind of lost key input on certain stages. But we might have operator input early on in the process, or just making sure that we're giving those thoughts. But those sessions are very much led by our creative team, so our creative director and strategy director really leading those sessions in terms of making sure that they come out with what they need, and the producers are making sure that we're ticking off the stuff, but there's the room and the space for the creative thinking.
Don,
we have these things called, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. We
have some other tools as well. We've developed a deck of they're called ideas cards. So these can be creative techniques and play cards, we call them, where it helps tease out different ways or different approaches from a narrative point of view to the creative thinking. And we have those as tools that we can bring out just to really help some of those sessions to make sure that they run in the right way and help get out these thoughts and ideas. And you can't always force creative ideas. You have to come back, and that's why it's like we run a session and then come back, rather than trying to cram everything. It's just doing it in the right way.
Yeah, sometimes you need that process time in your mind, right? Ideas germinate and things like that. As you're talking about that, one of the things that I got curious about was, you go through the design process, and I'm sure you have 3D models and you can see it on the screen and everything like that. But describe the feeling or the process of like walking into that space in real life in 3D, like for the first time. What's that like?
Oh, that's why we do what we do, isn't it? To see guests react to what you've created. It's brilliant, and I think that's what the biggest reward you get, isn't it, from delivering a project, is seeing it in real life and being able to stand there and see the reaction. And some of our process is we try and test things from a reaction point of view with guests as well. So part of our process is doing that, so we don't get surprises, but that what we think works in a room, and in theory that how that actually plays out and how people might respond to that, and have that as part of our iterative design process, so we can kind of think on maybe some of that input that comes in, which might kind of pivot or make us like slightly tweak a certain approach or a certain thing. But definitely the reward is seeing it for real. And also what's lovely is when you've created something in a visualization way, like you say in 3D and Unreal, and you've done the fly thing, you've shown what it's meant to be, and then you show it for real, and you're like, oh my God, it really is what we envisaged in reality. Like how close it is. It's lovely to be able to see that.
Are there ever any surprises when you walk into it in real life, of just like, oh, this is facing west, so the sun is actually casting more of a shadow, compared, or is every single minute granular detail, fully identified in the modeling and the design process? I
mean, with technology now, but that can be figured out, because you can put the sun path, you can do that in Unreal, you can plan out what things. There shouldn't be any surprises like that, because you do that as part of the design process, and it's all part of the thinking. So yeah, those are things that we consider as part of the design process.
So Don, you've kind of told us how Katapult started, at university, and I'm curious, over the years, how has that maybe culture kind of developed, or maybe evolved throughout time, and how would you describe the Katapult culture now?
Yeah, so it's really important to me and Phil, who's my business partner. He's the I say work husband, my Phil Higgins, who's the creative chief creative officer here. It's really important that we work in a business that we love and that the team love. It's all about the people. So from a cultural point of view, we've really spent a lot of time on our culture and our values, and making sure that we've got a really supportive and a culture that people want to work at. Why would I create a business that I don't enjoy? Why would I create a business that people don't enjoy working at? And I know that sounds really obvious to say, but there are many businesses out there that aren't enjoyable, and we work in an industry which is enjoyable, but it's putting the support around it as well. And to do that, it's putting that cultural piece in place. So making sure you've got that support mechanisms, and that we live by it as well. And what we quite like is when new people join the company and maybe they've been somewhere else or they've had this thing and they come with this, like, and it takes them a couple of months to go, oh, you really do the things that you say, and this is really that stuff, and and they kind of like let go of, you can see like the weight kind of lift, and it's really lovely to see that in practice, because you have to live by it. And yeah, we do a whole host of things, and it's just making sure that the team are, you know, really aligned and to where we're going and what their part in that and how important they all are to it. We have a full company quarterly meeting, and we have an annual where the whole company gets together, where we're very open. We share about the plan, how we've done, where we're going, and their role in it, and they're very actively part of it. And we've just got a very open culture from that point of view. And we put in a lot of support, and we listen to the team about what they want, and make sure that we implement the things. So we're very open in discussions around the things. We've just recently, last year, we became employee owned, so we've got growth shares that people have in the business, people who work here, so they're sharing success, and it's really important that we're listening to the team and what's important to them when building the business and making sure. And we have the ability, because we're independent boutique, that we can change things if things aren't working, and we can tweak things and we can add things in, and we have that ability to change.
So your viewpoint on change really kind of comes through again. The adaptability aspect of it is very important in all aspects of the business. Dawn, can you share maybe some of those guiding principles, if you were to sort of kind of say these are the core things that we focus on when delivering our company culture? If you were to create, say, like a bullet point list, what would be some of those bullet points that are true definitions of the culture of Katapult?
Yeah, so I think that's probably delivered through our values when we talk about our values, and that kind of really manifests. So that thing where I talked about relationships, with one another, with our clients, with our team, with our vendors, with our partners, that's really important part of Katapult, and being continuous curiosity and checking and thinking about how to do things differently, and always kind of moving forward from that point of view. Creativity is another one of our values, and giving the space to allow for that, and around innovation as well. Another one of our values, where we talk about being success focused and what that looks like, so making sure that it's commercially viable, and typically I've forgotten the fifth. It'll come to me.
Okay.
But a lot of it as well is around people, and so mental health is really important, because as a team of people, making sure that we're giving people time to look after their own mental health. So we have Plum Health, which is unlimited, that people can get professional mental health support that they can get access to, as well as open holiday. So if people have worked long hours and delivered a really mega project, that they know that they're not tapped into we've only got 20 days that we've got to take off. It's trusting the team. A big part of it's trust. So trusting the team to be able to use good judgment, and if they need some time off and they've delivered what they need to do, it's fine, and we're not going to keep account, as long as you book it and we're aware, and we can still get stuff delivered. And surprisingly, that's not been an issue. Everyone's like, oh, open holidays, everyone on holiday all the time. It's like, not at all. The team are committed. They're all, we trust the team, and they just use really good judgment. And it's things like that we put into place that really sort of help. And when I talked about as well that the openness of being open with the team about where we are, where we're going, and they're part of that, and their input onto that as well, and the role that they can play in our future, and that they have a stake in that. And absolutely, it's something that's important to us.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the holiday piece of it, because I've heard that same argument. Like, if you give them unlimited holidays, they're just going to be on holiday all the time. But I think it goes back to what you said too about culture, when you say, hey, we listen to them, we're open with them, we're transparent. So you're creating an environment where people want to be, so they're not abusing those policies. And I think a lot of times when you see people that abuse a policy, it's because there's something else wrong in that environment. Exactly. So I'm curious, from a leadership and employee engagement perspective, how do you continue that process of the culture, knowing that people change, and people can in terms of maybe people within the organization, times may change. The pandemic may have changed people's outlooks and things like that. So how do you maintain that high level of culture within the organization?
Absolutely. And I think, again, listening and understanding, identifying, because we talked about change and that things don't stand still. During Katapult's existence, we've been through an economic crisis, we've been through a pandemic, you've been through all these different things that have happened, which do have an impact and do change things. But I think, you ultimately, as long as you're listening and seeing what the impact of that change is, and speaking to the team about, okay, what do we need to change here? What do people, that switch from people being more hybrid working, what's working? Are people happy with that? And it's been how many people believed that or didn't think that everyone could work from home or be as agile and as hybrid as they are? And then here we all are with something we had a hybrid work policy and a flexible working policy forever, but for some reason we weren't really doing it because we kind of felt we should or shouldn't. And then the pandemic happened and everyone realized actually this is quite beneficial and we can be more flexible. And suddenly, those things can happen, but it's making it so the company's got the things in place that makes it easy for the team to do those things, and there's no friction there. So that that's completely possible. So from being that your meetings and your sessions, you can allow it to be dual or hybrid, and you can give that flexibility. And I think it's a lot of things around just being really responsive and listening. And we have obviously the team have one-on-ones where they can air things, but we also have this thing that weekly, each of the teams have it's called an IDS. So you identify and discuss and solve an issue. So a lot of people identify an issue, they discuss it because it feels quite cathartic, but they don't always get to the solve. So if we do that on a weekly basis across the whole team, so identify, discuss and solve. And we do that as a leadership team. We do that within our, each of our sub teams. It's like, if there's an issue, there's always going to be issues. There's all the time. There's never not going to be an issue to solve, whether that's internally or a project issue. It's creating the culture where it's healthy to say, I don't know, or I'm stuck on this, or I don't know how to figure this out. Being able to raise it and feel that you've got a supportive environment where you can raise that issue, it can be discussed in a healthy way, and some actions and solves can come from it, and it moves forward. And that's the bit where we really focus on, is coming up with a solve. It's like, what's the next action? And that's again part of it's a cultural thing, but it's us practicing that.
I read the book Traction last year. That sounds like that's what you're referencing. That's where I learned about the IDS and that meeting cadence and all that. Yeah.
So from a personal point of view, when I took maternity leave, which my daughter's now 7, nearly 8, I read that book on maternity leave, and I came back into the business after maternity leave with a fresh head and went, we're implementing EOS to Katapult, and we implemented EOS, and it was a game changer. It was so simple, really clean, really clear, and all that stuff. It just made everything. It simplified things, and it made making decisions a lot easier, and it cut through a lot of noise. And I think that my perspective changed quite a bit after being on maternity, because you come back to things with a different focus, a different lens on what's important, and it just solved a lot of things, and it was a very good. We actually brought in a EOS implementer, Dean, who worked with us for 6 months because we wanted to kind of put it in, and Dean worked with us, and now we just run it as a leadership team. And I met with some other businesses as well who had implemented Traction and the EOS system as well, and talked about people who 3 years down the road. I'd been in Boston, I think, and I met a couple of businesses out there, and then there's a local business in Derby that had implemented it, and I had a chat with the CEO there and talked about it, and said, 5 years down the line, is this something that you still rolling with? Because we've all been there where you've had academic things or this book and that book, and what I really liked about it wasn't only it had reason to it, it was practical, and it was a lot of common sense, and it was easy to run with and follow up, and actually deliver, and it's been we've run with that for the last 8 years we've been running on EOS.
So it sounds like your team are traction pros, whereas we're a traction. Yeah. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. I do have a question, actually, going back to one of the things that you said about the space to allow creativity and innovation. I would love to dig a little bit deeper into that. Growing up, I had a number of teachers in school who'd say on the first day of class, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Raise your hand, you have an idea, you have a question, and A lot of times, sometimes it's just a saying until the first student raises their hand and then is made to feel bad for asking that question or bringing up an idea. But in the innovative process, one of the things in many of the conversations that we've had with people over the years is that sometimes there are bad ideas and you need those bad ideas, and you need to kind of get it all on the table and allow people to express the bad ideas, to iterate them, and then get it to the really good idea. That really good idea that becomes a final product may not have happened if it wasn't for a string of bad ideas that led to that. So can you talk about maybe kind of creating that open space to be able to say there are stupid questions, there are bad ideas, let them out, bring them forward.
Yeah, and that brings me back to the value that I think which I forgot, which is authenticity, which, sorry, I forgot to say that one, which is a really important one. And that was basically it's been able to, you can just say what you're thinking, and you're not going to be like, oh, you can't think that. No bad idea. Absolutely, throw it on the table. But again, it's creating that environment where you can create those sessions where you can have those ideas, but also within the business, allowing us to create projects where we can do some of that thinking, whether it's an R&D project where we're trying to figure some stuff out. Obviously, sometimes that happens on actual live projects, but we also have projects which we set up where we're looking at how to think about things, or a certain model of a thing that we want to understand how that might work from a throughput point of view. But we will have like these separate projects which we set up, which are really about thinking and figuring things out, and and we look back at it and go, oh, that didn't quite land where we wanted, but look at what we learned from doing that process. And we have wrap-up sessions as well. What did we learn? Because we're all so good at, like, we've delivered it, right, move on, delivered it, then move on. And like, what do we learn from the stuff that we've just done so we can take that forward? What were the lessons, and putting that back in. And our projects director's great. She's very process driven, and she takes a lot of those learnings and then implements it into the process of how we work. So it's absolutely creating that space, both in terms of creative sessions, but also in terms of the process that supports that, and allowing the time within the company for those things to happen, and for people to tinker, especially when you've got people who are creative or technical people who really want to figure out ways of working, or new ways. When you're working in new engines like Unreal, and you need to give that space for figuring out. So it's sometimes creating some dummy projects where you can do that thinking, or hypothesis, or briefs that we can set up internally that allow some of that thinking and happening to happen.
Sounds good. In the meantime, I'll ask you a little bit about sort of maybe the end of the process, and how you get there in terms of what the team member or the employee involvement will be. For example, if you're designing a themed entertainment space, somewhere along the line, there's going to be an employee in there, or a team member that is going to be either interacting with the space or interacting with the guests. So how involved that team member wouldn't be involved, but how involved in the thought process is it to have that team member, thought of during that time?
Yeah, it is absolutely the case that they're involved. I can give an example of a particular project we've just worked on, which activated across a lot of the Lego Discovery Centres. We worked with Lego and Merlin, and we actually brought in their hosts on site as part of the project team, and they were part of when we were developing the creative thinking and the delivery of it. We actually brought them in as part of the process, and then we went on to, not only did they were part of the process in the creative process, and then the delivery aspect of it, we also were thinking about those operational team members, hosts, which were going to be running that experience, seasonal staff who were going to be coming in and going out, and coming in and going out, changing, thinking about that. And we did bite-sized short videos that was delivered by the lead host, who would explain what this activation is, how it should work, done in like a 2-minute video, which was able to quickly watch, understand, and so that the expectation of what the guest experience delivery of that activation, because we can design the most beautiful things, but if it's not delivered and executed, and that engagement from the people to people point of view is not delivered, it'll fall down. So we want to make sure that from a guest experience point of view that is delivered, and we've been looking at ways in which we can do that by working with the on-site ops teams. So we've got examples of where we're working with the ops teams as part of the creative process, which is absolutely key to making an experience a success.
That's cool.
It's so fascinating to learn that, because you just kind of sort of quoted a quote that we've actually brought up in the last several episodes from Disney, which is like, you can design and create and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality. And I've always kind of really thought or wondered really how that factors into the design process, because I can think of a number of places that I've been to, and I won't say where they are, but the design is spectacular, and the facility itself is absolutely magnificent. And from that standpoint, like, not only checks all the boxes, but exceeds expectations. And then some of the team members perhaps didn't embrace that, right? Didn't embrace what the guests are coming to see and being able to experience all that. So it's, it's just so interesting, because they can really make or break the experience. They can take your work and they can lift
completely.
it up, or they can bring it down a little too.
Yeah, and we'll often do. Sometimes we'll have, like, when we do our guest experience audit work, you're going into attractions and seeing from a full guest experience scoring matrix how it's performing from a guest experience point of view, and looking at the emotional journey map and looking at how that guest interaction is with staff, and that's one of the metrics that's looked at alongside many others. But it's so important to tick that right, and obviously, if you're not the operator, we're the designer, we're not the operator, you're relying on the operator to deliver that experience. And often, sometimes things, they can go in and monitor it. There's no, it's nice to go see an attraction that you've done, and then you can go in without them knowing you're going there, because you can see how it delivered against expectation that you had in your creative vision. And that's something we sometimes do for attractions, is we go in as a bit of a mystery shopper and do those guest experience audits and come back with recommendations on things that could really help elevate the experience with both in the short term and longer term.
I'm glad you brought up the guest experience audit, because that's something I saw on the website that I really wanted to ask you about. So can you dive a little deeper into what that is and what that process looks like?
Yeah, so I can give you like the kind of headlines of the approach. So the full kind of guest experience scoring is where we have a system which we've got a matrix which we've devised, and it looks at the pre-visit, the arrival, the key experience within that attraction, and then the during and the post-visit. So it does an analysis, comes out with a summary findings from the visit, and you have also emotional journey mapping as well. So it's the different emotions that happen during your visit as well, and then we create an emotional map, and then we've got a dwell time review, so which areas the attraction are having the most dwell time, and then a guest spend analysis, and then what the key touch points, and the key touch points can be across digital, self-guided, staff's physical touch points, and we pull that all into one report, and then there's recommendations, because we can identify where great success happens, where there's some friction, and we can come out the back of that with some recommendations of things that could make a big difference.
Cool. So I've done a lot of work with mystery shopping and with guest experience scoring and with quality assurance audits, and one of the things that makes it really nice, and a lot of things you talked about, is you're able to break it down and really get into kind of the granular specifics. So it's objective. It's not necessarily opinionated.
Independent.
It's cut and dry. Emotional journey mapping is something that sounds a little bit less tangible. What exactly does, or how do you measure that?
Yeah, so Robbie, who leads on that side of things at Katapult, he's devised a matrix. It's actually references the Wheel of Emotions by Robert Pulchik. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's the methodology in which he's built that process on.
And speaking of that, maybe even again from the design perspective, are you now then looking at, as you're designing something, what emotion are you trying to evoke in that moment?
Yeah.
And then how do you do that, like from a creative standpoint?
Yeah, because sometimes when people think about emotion, you're thinking, oh, you want everyone to be really happy. Well, actually, sometimes you want people to feel really comfortable and secure, or you want people to be scared. I mean, a scare experience, it's understanding what is the emotion. You might have a moment where it's quite intimate and you really want a family connected moment, and you want it to be quite quiet and tranquil, and then there's moments where there's real like elements of joy. It's understanding that emotional mapping when you're designing the experience as well, and what is the feeling you're trying to evoke with the space and the environment and the narrative. And so that forms part of our design thinking as well, is like, what's the feeling, the emotion that you want people to get. I always remember the first time I walked into Disney Paris with my daughter, and she was 3, and walked in and through the gates, and the parade had just started, and I had my daughter in my hands, and she's 3 years old. I cried. The parade came around the corner, the music, and I was just like, I get tingles now. It's like that moment of like, I'm at Disney with my daughter, and it's that moment of like, that's exactly what they wanted me to feel. That's exactly they got me completely. I'm there, and I'm feeling exactly what they wanted me to feel in that moment.
And that's why we all do what we do. That's what people are paying for, right? That's what we as an industry, that's what we're selling, right?
Yeah.
How much does that, or would say, where in the planning process does that come into play? Is that like, is that the anchor? Like, here's our desired emotion, we're gonna build it from here, or is it a few steps down, or I guess how does it play into it?
Yeah, so literally we had a creative session, our first creative session yesterday for a new project, and emotion was part of that session.
Yeah.
In terms of what's the feeling, we want this to create when we're thinking about that creative idea and the different elements of that experience, emotions were part of that.
So this may get a little granular, as Josh likes to say, with the emotions of it. But you mentioned so many different emotions that people can feel, scared and comfortable and happy and all those different things. I would imagine that there's a ramp up and a ramp down time for some of those, right? So that's got to be part of the design. Like, they're going to be happy, and then that's going to come down, and then you want them to be scared, or you know what I mean? So I guess my question is, like, how do you map that just in terms of time when it comes to how they're, kind of feeling those ups and downs of the emotions?
Yeah, and I think that's when you can think about in one particular attraction, and like you can have a particular experience where you've got the overall emotion of that one experience. When you're looking at a wider park, I think, those when you have more like dwell time, downtime spaces, sensory overlap is something we've been working a lot on. So like too much overwhelm, like people, it's about having the quiet spaces and the ability for, you actually to chill a little bit in between, and how do you kind of like, 'cause you can't be in the whole time. No one wants to be that level the whole time. But I think it's about it depends on the size of the attraction, but it's absolutely looking at the overall pace of it. And thinking about how that knits together, whether it be a small singular F&B experience with something through to a full resort attraction. It's thinking about that day guest. Is it a 2-hour experience? Is it a day guest? Is it you're there for a weekend? It's thinking about that whole journey.
And then I've got to imagine that this. If you think of a visit to a theme park, it largely is an exhausting experience. So people are, walking away, and and I've got to imagine that this emotional journey, if you take it and really look at it at the macro level, probably helps to recharge their batteries at the critical time. Like you said, they can't be, happy or thrilled, 100% of the time. They need that kind of, Matt said, that ramp up, that ramp down, and probably that those ebbs and flows of, here's a bench, the desired emotion from the bench is comfort, right? And that's, that's there. You can look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah, and it leans into another project we've been working on, which is around nature-based regeneration, and we've looked at nature-based connectedness, and how that benefits your well-being. And if you look at a lot of parks and attractions, they are often located in a beautiful natured space, which has got a lot of ability for you to take that downtime to explore, to go for a walk, and it's kind of using those spaces, that reconnect space. And we've been looking at the benefits of that in relation to your well-being, and actually not just it being there, but actually connecting with it in a meaningful way, and what that does to you, both physically and emotionally, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All this discussion of emotional journeys has gotten me really thinking about, just different kinds of business and the things that people go through, because we're all emotional creatures, right? We all have emotions at different points throughout the day and throughout our journey. So that part, along with everything, has been really fascinating. But Don, I'm curious, coming out of university and going into this career, in this path, what advice or thoughts do you have for other people that might be pursuing a career in this creative field?
A huge thing I'd say is like join things like the TA, get along to industry events, connect with the industry. We're a very friendly industry. There's many ways in which you can get to meet and get involved with people within it. And I think that TA is a great way to do that. So if you're interested into this industry, getting along to TA Tuesday, and which non-members can, and just understanding the industry more as a first step, and just attending events and expos and all those sort of things is really important. And I think understanding it more and speaking to people who work within it, understanding where, and I think as part of TA, it's kind of our role to look at and widen people's understanding of the career path into this world, because everybody's career path that brought them into themed entertainment differs, whether you've been somebody who's operated on a park or had a summer job at an attraction. There's something that sparks your interest or love of this industry, and it's finding that pathway in, isn't it? And through to people who are mechanical engineers and technicians, to AV, to it's such a breadth of industry specialists that this offers. It's finding, if it's your passion and a love, finding that route in and joining those sort of organizations.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Don, this has been just such a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. As we start to wind this down here, if people want to learn more about Katapult, or if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
So www.katapult.co.uk, or look me up on LinkedIn, Dawn Foote Katapult. You can connect with me on there.
And that's Katapult with a K.
It is Katapult with a K.
Absolutely. Well, like Josh said, Dawn, this has been a great conversation. It just kind of flew by. So we really appreciate your time and all of your wonderful insight. And for everybody who is out there watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.